All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started here in just a minute. I just wanted to let everybody know that the chat function is turned off. If you have a question at the bottom of your screen, if you'll just put it in the Q&A, and then what I'll do is I'll stop every now and then and answer a group of questions and try to get everything going to make sure that we address everybody. I'm not going to stop for questions every other slide because I want to respect everybody's time. But I will try to get as many of the questions at the end as I possibly can. All right, so welcome. This is the Simple Divorce Clinic presented by Legal Aid North Carolina. My name is Allison Young. I'm a managing attorney of one of the legal aid offices in Central North Carolina. And I specialize in family law and estate planning, which is wills and stuff. So I've been doing family law work for quite a while, and I hope that we can help get you some tools that you need today to get through this process. I think when you registered for this clinic, it said it was going to be somewhere on the order of 2.5 hours. I don't know that it will take us that long today. If you have to leave, if you have to come, you have to go, that's fine. You do what you need to do. And you can always register for another clinic if you need to, or for some reason you can't finish this one. So who is Legal Aid? If you're here, you probably at least visited our website to get here, but we are a statewide nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal services in just about everything civil for low-income folks in order to ensure that they're actually being given the access to the courts that they need to get. Now, we do not do anything criminal. So if you have a speeding ticket in your back pocket and you're kind of hoping maybe you'd hear something about how someone could help you with that too, we're not going to help you with your speeding ticket. But this is just some of the stuff that we might be able to help you with. So if you're having housing issues, if you're facing eviction or foreclosure, if you've been denied unemployment benefits, if you're having if your kids are having problems with school, with their education, with their IEP, if they've been suspended or expelled, anything like that, if you're having issues with domestic violence or consumer issues, so is your house being foreclosed on, or if you had a fraud issue, anything on this list, we might be able to do something for you. Now, obviously, we're not going to do anything with that today, because today we're just going to talk about divorce, but I did want to make you aware of it. And you can get services on the same place that you signed up to attend this clinic. You can see this is just what our website looks like. You can either apply online or you can apply by phone. If you apply online, someone will give you a call back. If you apply by phone, you'll call and you'll wait for somebody to talk to you. And you can see we have a lot of other resources available. So just like you have the clinic here for Simple Divorce, there's also some family law self-help things and some other packages, you know, for things that you might need. So just making you aware that that's there. And because I'm a lawyer, now we have to have a disclaimer. So I'm presenting this clinic to you to help you do this process. Right now, just because you're sitting here in our clinic, we are not your attorney, and we're not going to come to court with you. Okay. So just because we are sitting here and having this chat and learning how to do this stuff, I don't represent you. Nobody in my firm represents you. This is what it means to do it pro se. You're doing it on your own and learning how to do it on your own without the assistance of an attorney. Now, there's going to be a number of times today when I'm going to say, if you want to do this thing, or if you want to do that thing, you need to stop right now and go talk to an attorney or call our helpline, because this may not be the process for you. So we're going to go over that a number of times. And if I say something where you're like, oh, you know, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I shouldn't be here, you just go ahead and feel free to clock out and get the rest of your afternoon back, because I don't want anyone to think that that they can get, you know, a full service divorce where they get a bunch of money from their spouse, they get alimony and all this stuff that you hear about on TV. That's not the purpose of this. This is just going to be a simple divorce. You know, it could be amicable. It could be that y'all have been separated for a long time and you just need to get it formalized. Or it could be that somebody's left and has been gone for a long time and there isn't any property, or we're not worried about it, or the house was taken care of, or whatever. So I just want you to know this is, you know, we're not your attorney, and this is not for a complicated divorce. Okay. So if you have some complicated issues, this may not be for you, but we're going to go through each of them one at a time. So what we're going to do today is, the first thing we're going to do is, again, make sure that this is the right place for you, to make sure that this is the kind of filing that you need to do, that you don't need to be doing something else. Then we're going to talk about what information you need. Anytime you go to court for anything, you need a lot of information. You need names and addresses and dates and places. Sometimes you need money amounts. We won't for this, but sometimes you do. So we're going to go over what information you need to get before you start, because there's some stuff, if you don't have the information, it's going to change the process for you. It's going to be different depending on how you want to file it. So we're going to talk about getting your information together and what things you should start to save or hang on to or preserve. And then we're actually going to talk about how to fill out the forms. We're going to do that through a website. There's a couple different ways that you can do it. We're going to do it the easy way. There is a hard way to do it, and we're not going to do that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how we file the forms, like what you do and where you go, and how you actually get a divorce judgment signed that actually makes you officially, legally divorced. So that's our plan today. We're going to start at the front and go to the back. So first, is this right for you? Is this what you need to be doing? If you want a simple divorce and you're not looking to argue over property or money, this may be right for you. But if you have, if you're new to the state, if you've not lived here for very long, this is probably not for you. So to get a simple divorce, at least you or your spouse, one or the other, doesn't have to be both of you, has to have lived in North Carolina for at least 6 months. If you've just moved here, if you're fleeing a bad situation, if you came here for a new job or anything like that, and you haven't been here for at least 6 months, then you cannot file for divorce in North Carolina. Okay, so you either need to wait, or you need to consider, if you've been separated long enough and you really want to get divorced as soon as possible, you need to consider filing in the state where you did live before this. You also need to make sure that you have been living separate and apart from your current spouse for at least 1 year. So what does that mean? That means that you moved out or your spouse moved out. It doesn't matter if both of you agreed that this was the end, but what it does matter is that you were not in the same place, okay? It also means there weren't any try again periods. So it can't have been that you moved out in June of last year, but you tried to reconcile and maybe you moved home at Christmas for a little while and you went to family gatherings together and things like that. It's got to be that you have been apart with the intent to stay apart for that whole year, okay? And then lastly, you cannot have lived in the same house. So just because you moved into a separate room, that isn't being separated because you're still sharing the same space. If you're looking to get a divorce, you need to be in a different space from somebody else. Now we're going to talk about the important part, that is your money. So once you figured out if you've lived here long enough and you've been separated for long enough, if you want to get a divorce judgment, it is going to affect all of your property rights. So if you own a house with your spouse, if you own a car with your spouse, if your spouse committed some kind of wrongdoing that you would like to be paid for, so maybe they were abusive, maybe they cheated on you, maybe they ran off with your money. If you want any of those rights to be preserved, this is not for you. Okay. If you know that, you're going to take the house, your spouse is going to take the cars, the titles have already been done, you've already refinanced, all that other stuff. If you ever want to fight over your property or get a judge to say that you get this much of your property and your spouse gets this much of your property, a simple divorce is not for you. You need to talk to an attorney because this is going to have an effect on your money. But if you look at me and you say, well, Attorney Young, we don't have any money. We don't own any house. There was an apartment. I brought my car into the relationship. My spouse brought their car into the relationship, and we just both went our separate ways. Then maybe this is okay for you. As long as you're not going to be looking to get spousal support, like separation support or any kind of alimony, then this is fine for you. If that's not what you're interested in, if you want money out of this, then you should just go ahead and sign out now and spend your afternoon looking for an attorney to talk to. If you want to divide your property, so this is about the house or anything like that, you have to talk to an attorney. And I'm telling you, if you fill out these forms and you take them to the clerk and you file them, you've lost the right to get this stuff forever. You won't ever be able to get it unless you go in and dismiss your case. So you can't come back to the court after after the judge has issued the divorce decree and say, oh, but I need the house. The judge is going to say, well, you should have asked for it beforehand. You're not going to be able to get it now. Also, a simple divorce does not have any impact on your custody rights. So if you need a divorce now for whatever reason, but you have children with your spouse, that they're your biological or adopted children that both of you have adopted, then you can still file the simple divorce, and then you can file a custody action later. Oftentimes these actions are done together. Like a lot of times they're done at the same time during court. When somebody does the divorce action, they'll also do the custody action and try to take care of everything at one time, but it isn't necessary. So you can still file this simple divorce and still be able to look for custody of your children later. You can also always seek child support. You don't have to have any kind of court action go in to seek child support. All you need to do is go to child support's website and fill out an application. And then what happens is child support takes over at that point. They will assign workers to your case. They will assign an attorney to your case, and a judge will decide how much child support you are entitled to. That doesn't have anything to do with your divorce or your custody case. So as long as you're not looking to divide property or money, this is probably something that you can use to get your divorce. All right, so let's talk about the information that you're going to need to gather, okay? When I was in private practice, I used to tell people that they needed to get their shoebox together. I used to tell people to keep everything in a shoebox. I don't think people keep shoeboxes anymore, but you need to keep all of your records in one place. The same way you would keep your passport and your social security cards together, you need to make sure that you keep all of this stuff together so that when you go to court to try to get this resolved, you have everything that you need. But right now, what we're going to look for is the information that you're going to have to fill the papers out. So for you, information about you, you're going to need your name, your address. If you still have your marriage license, that's great, because there's going to be a couple of questions that we're going to look at where you're going to need to get information off of that license, like what exact day was that marriage license issued, what county and state was that marriage license issued in, and things like that. If you have children, you're going to need your children's full names and birth dates. It does not matter if you're not seeking custody right now, but the divorce court likes to know when they're entering one of these things, who has the children and what children there are of the marriage. Again, this is not going to affect your custody rights, but you are going to need their information if you want to file for a divorce and you have children with your spouse. You're also going to need to know where the location of the clerk of court is where you're going to go file. So you need to figure out, and we're going to look at a website where you can find that in a few minutes, but you need to know where it is you're going to have to take all these papers once you're done so that you're prepared to talk to that person and get the process going. Now, the information that you need about your spouse, not quite as much as you're going to need for you. You need their full name. You need their current address. Now, if you look at me and you say, I don't know where they live. They've run away, or they left me, or I haven't seen them in this many years. We'll talk about your options there, but it's going to make it a little bit more difficult. It's going to make it a little bit longer of a process, and it's going to make it a little bit more expensive. And if you're concerned about that, when we go through that part of it, if you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this right, maybe you should speak to an attorney about it. You're also going to need to know what your spouse's military status is. This just means, are they on active duty? Are they retired military? Or were they never in the military at all? And the reason this matters is that a court is not going to give you a divorce if your spouse is deployed overseas right now and they don't have the opportunity to come back and participate in the process. So you're going to sign a piece of paper that says, I swear that either they are not in the military, or they've never been in the military, or they're not on active service right now, or you're going to have to say that they are on active service. It's not going to prevent you from filing, but it may just mean that it takes a little bit longer for the process to complete itself, because they're probably not going to do this until your spouse is back from active service. All right, so once you've gotten all of your information, there's two paths that we can take. You can either download all the forms that you need, and there's a website that you can download all the forms for, and I'm going to show you where that is if you're not comfortable doing the other method. So you download a list of forms from the internet, you fill out each form, and then you go take it to the clerk of court's office to file it. Each one of those forms asks for a lot of the same information. What's your name? What's your address? Where do you live? What's your husband's name? What's his address? There's a lot of stuff that's very repetitive. And so if you download this list of forms, you're going to feel like you write the same thing about 20 times just to get the whole thing completed. But North Carolina launched this year a project called Guide and File. So this is the other way that you can file. You're going to go to a website and you're going to complete what they call a 1-hour interview that gathers all of your information and it fills in the forms for you. So what you do, you take all that information that you gather that we talked about just a second ago, and you go and you just type it all in. You answer the questions that the website presents you, and you type it in, and then it gives you the forms. Now, like I said, if you've gathered all your information beforehand, it's going to be a lot shorter process. And then once you get to the very end, it's going to provide you a place to print all the forms that you need out and take it to your clerk of court. This is the way to go. This is not the way to go. This process can be saved at any point if you create an account. So you can start the process and then, oh no, I gotta go pick the kids up from school. You can pause the process. Your forms will be there if if you spill a cup of coffee on the ones that you printed out the first time without you having to redo them. So you can do anything like that. So one of the things that you're gonna want to make sure that you're prepared to do is just to be able to sit and fill this thing out and then be able to print it. So this is the issue. Now, this is where some of you may say, well, I don't have a printer or I don't have an availability of doing this. I'm going to suggest that you go to your public library and complete it so that you can print it there, because you have to have papers to file at the clerk of court. Unfortunately, you can't just fill this thing out and hit submit and it be done. You can't do it all online. You're still going to have to go to the clerk of court to get the papers filed. This is what it looks like briefly, and then we're actually just going to go through one. But this is a free system, okay? And it works for a lot of different cases. We're just going to look at the divorce cases. Like I said, you can stop and start at any point you need, and the website's here, but I'm going to show you the easy way to find it because you're not going to have these slides right in front of you when you're trying to find this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through an example case. We're going to go through, I'm going to close my slides for a minute. We're going to go to the website and we're just going to walk through it. We're just going to do one. We're going to get the blue bloods here, their divorce filing. Okay. So that's what we're going to start from the back and from the front. Before I do that, I did have one question in the Q&A that said, I purchased property before my marriage. Do I need to get a lawyer? Not necessarily. It really depends on whether or not your spouse owns that property with you. But if it's your property, then it's your property. Now, again, if you're nervous about this, if you're concerned about that property, then you may still want to talk to a lawyer. Just because you go talk to a lawyer doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hire that lawyer. You may just need some advice. You may just need to get a couple of questions answered before you can decide whether or not you would like to do this. All right, I do see that a couple people have raised their hands. If you would please use the Q&A that's in the bottom of the Zoom to just type your question so that I can make sure that I get to all of them at the end or when we have some natural breaks. All right, so if you give me just a minute, we're going to switch our presentation. All right. I can see that some of you are definitely capable of using the hand raise function. If anybody can just let me know, or if my host can let me know if we can see the website that I have put on the screen. I want to make sure that we can see it behind the slides. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so this is the North Carolina Courts website. If you've ever gotten a ticket, if you've ever gotten if you've ever had to go to court for anything, you might have been to this website to check your court date. But what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the services up here. So if you click on services, you can see right here is Guide and File. We're going to go to this website. It looks just like what I showed on the slides. This is a list of the kinds of cases that you can use to do Guide and File. We only care about absolute divorce. Okay, so this is the one that we're going to use. And if you are struggling with this, they're down here. There's this little guide and file video. There's a little YouTube video here that will give you a tour. We're not going to watch that. And there's also a place that has a frequently asked questions where you can search. So like you can see the #1 article here is how do I contact the court? Like looking for the clerk of court's office that you need to find. They're definitely trying to help you, work through those different issues and make sure that you can find stuff. It has a search feature. And if you have any other questions, once you've done the papers, you can always speak to an attorney or talk to the clerk of court in your county and talk to them about what you need to do. Okay, I see a couple of questions in the Q&A that are going to be answered as we go through this. So I'm just going to go ahead and start our process. So we're going to start a filing. And it's going to make sure that you're where you're supposed to be. So we want to start an absolute divorce filing. And once we get here, it's going to tell us, we're going to do all of these different things. Now, there's 2 different options here. There's the divorce. It wants you to do that one first. If you believe that you're going to ask the clerk of court to let you file this for free, it's also going to ask you to fill out this petition to proceed as an indigent. What that means is you're telling the court, like, look, Madam Clerk or Your Honor, I am on disability. I have SNAP benefits. I cannot afford to file a lawsuit. I just really need to get a divorce. There's a form you can fill out for that. But we're just going to go through the divorce for right now. There's a place over here for you to save your work. And I'll just click this to show you what it looks like. If you click save your work, it's going to ask you to set up an account so that you can come back to this and go through, so that you can stop and start. I'm not going to do that because we're going to go through the whole thing today, but this is what it looks like. And it will just allow you to do this. This is, again, free. You're not going to be asked to pay anything by generating these papers. You would not have to pay anything until you went to the clerk of court's office to actually file your divorce papers. All right, so let's go through a filing. So we're going to start our action here, and it's a little slow. There's a couple places where you'll just see a load screen. And don't mind that. Just let it finish. Just let it think, because it is asking you some questions. So we're just going to go through each one of these screens, because either this would be in the slides or it would be in the screen. So I just want to make sure that you can see. So this is telling you that what the answers that you're going to give to the survey are going to help you fill out all the papers that you need for the divorce. Okay. It is reminding you, just like I did, when you finalize an absolute divorce, you cannot then come back and ask for any kind of support or alimony or distribution of your property, like things that you own, houses, homes, things like that, or even debts, any debts that you might have accumulated together. Completing a divorce can also change your Social Security benefits. And if your spouse dies, and your divorce is done, you're their ex-spouse. And so you're probably not going to get anything out of their estate if they die after you've completed this process. Okay. And it's going to tell you, just like I did a ton of times, if you are not sure about using this form, or if you fill this out and then you print it and you just don't feel good about it, you really should go talk to an attorney first. So if you're fighting over a house, right? If you have, if somebody's arguing about, well, I'm on the mortgage, but you're on the deed, or, the car title's in your name, but I'm the one paying for it. If you have any of those situations going on, you should probably talk to an attorney, because once you filled this out, there's not going to be any way a judge can say, okay, you get the house and you get the car. That's not going to happen in a simple divorce. I think this is one of those things that you need to be looking at in terms of, this is really just simple. You don't really have any property to fight over. So if you have things that are currently being argued over right now, if they're kind of a tug of war, this probably isn't for you. So we're going to go to the start page. It's just, this is very simple. It's very user friendly, I think, in case you're wondering. And for those of you who are just sitting here thinking, ooh, maybe I do need an attorney, there is a place here where you can click and it says find an attorney. It also will let you find your courthouse, and there's a link for you to ask for nonprofit legal help. So if you're looking for any kind of legal help, this is what you can do. All right, just like I had a disclaimer, the website has a disclaimer. Okay, it's telling you make sure you read everything carefully, make sure you review everything, make sure everything on your documents is right. And if you're not sure, you need to talk to a lawyer. Okay, and again, they've given you a number of places where you can look at to find that. And then you also understand that by going through this, the website is not your lawyer either. Okay, or the little rabbits behind the scenes operating the website, not your lawyers. Once you agree to all this, then you say that you agreed to it and you continue on, and it will start your interview. Now, this is going to tell you the same information that I told you you needed. You need to know your marriage date and location, the date you separated. See, all that stuff will be on your marriage license if you happen to have a copy of it. The county and state where you currently live, both of you. Your legal names and birth dates. So this isn't, this isn't if your name is Ronnie and it's been Ronnie since you were 2, but your birth certificate says Ronald, it needs to be Ronald, not Ronnie. Okay. The name you want to use after the divorce is final. So this is if you want to change your last name. So if you would like to go back to your maiden name, or I used to work with someone who just decided I think she was on her 3rd divorce. She decided she just wanted a new last name, and so she just picked a new last name. So if you want to change your name, you can do that here. Now, if you don't do it here and then you decide later that you would like to change your name, or if like you want to wait till your kids turn 18 so that everybody, that they have, name continuity till they get out of school, you can do that, but you don't have to. Like I said, you can make the change later, but you can also get it done now if you want to get it done now. If you're going to ask the court to allow you to do this for free, this is some other information that you might need. All right, you're going to have to talk about how much money you make, what any kind of benefits payments that you get are, if you get any government benefits, what your expenses are, because they want to make sure that if they're going to allow you to not pay this fee, that you're really in a bad place and you really need to have this fee waived. Okay, we're going to do that at the very end, and I know this list is a lot longer than the list that you have of the information you need about the divorce, but that's because money's involved and that's just how it is. All right, so it's going to talk to you a little bit more about what you need to do before you start once the page loads. And this is where it's going to make sure that you are where you're supposed to be. So some of the questions some of you are asking in the Q&A, this is going to answer it for you. So for our 2 people, our blue bloods, we're going to say that yes, they have lived in North Carolina for more than 6 months. But if for some reason the answer was no, we tell it no, it's going to say, stop. You shouldn't do this right now. So if you ever get to one of these places as you're filling this out where it says, stop, you shouldn't do this right now, then you should stop and not do it right now. You should probably go talk to an attorney about when you can do it. All right, it's going to ask you if you want to stop. We're going to say no, because we're going to go back and say, yes, the blue bloods have lived in North Carolina for at least 6 months. Have you been separated for at least 1 year and a day? Now, there's a little button here that you can click for more information. This is, what does it mean by separated? Okay. This requires that you cannot be living together. I mentioned this before. I think some folks have come in late. I saw at least one of these questions in the Q&A. You cannot physically live in the same home and consider yourself separated. So you can't be sharing, you can't be in one bedroom and your spouse be in the other bedroom and that be separated. This is hard for some folks because some folks don't have anywhere else to go. I understand that, but that's a case where you need to talk to a lawyer because there may be some other alternatives for you that are not the absolute divorce, but that may get your process going even if you don't have anywhere else to go, if you cannot physically move out of your home for some reason or another. And again, it's going to tell you, if, when you sign your divorce complaint, you are swearing under oath that, yeah, no, we've really been separated for more than a year, or right that year and 1 day. And it's going to remind you, if you say something and it isn't true here, if you say so, and this means even if you make a mistake, because if you make a mistake, but it's one that really matters, you can still get into some kind of trouble. You could be found, guilty of criminal perjury. Also, your divorce case may just be dismissed and you may just have to start all over again. You don't want either of those things to happen. So if at any point you're not sure about, any one of these things, you can always click for more information and get it to tell you, okay, there's more information to be had here. All right, but right now, the Blue Bloods, yes, they've been separated for at least a year and a day. Specifically, they separated after the national title game last year because they're both from Chapel Hill and Durham, respectively. All right, so at the time you separated, so this is just asking questions as whoever's filling this out. Did you or your spouse believe the separation would be permanent? Really, you're probably answering this question for you, but if your spouse left you, you might be answering this question for them. So if you left last July 4th and you said, I am never going back, then you have the intent to permanently separate. If your spouse left you on July 4th and you thought maybe they would come back, but then they never did, and it's been more than a year, then it's possible that you could answer yes to this question as well. But we're just going to say that Miss Blue Blood definitely intended to go and not come back. Again, it's going to remind you, do you ever want to receive any kind of support from your spouse? If you say yes here, it's going to tell you to stop and you should not be here. So this is one of those things, if you have any kind of money issues or other surrounding issues, if you're concerned that your spouse may have ruined or is in the process of ruining your credit, if your spouse cleaned out your bank account when they left, if your spouse took a car or something when they left and you want it back, then you need to talk to an attorney because they need to do more stuff to be able to get your property or your money issue straightened out than you're going to be able to do in this filing. All right, but we're going to say no here because we want to be able to continue just to show how this system works. All right, so do you want the court to divide property or debts from the marriage? Again, if you say yes, like if you guys, went all in on a house or a piece of property and the market fell out and now there's a lot of debt that's assigned to both of you, if you want the court to order your spouse to have to pay more of that because it was their idea and not yours or something like that, you're going to have to talk to an attorney. If you don't do this, so let's say, for example, you bought a house with your spouse. You bought it right after you got married, and one of you is still living there and one of you has left. Okay, so maybe you're still living there and your spouse did leave. If you don't do anything with the property in this divorce action, you're still going to be co-owners of that property. You're still going to own the property together. You can still ask your spouse maybe to buy you out from that property. If there's a mortgage, you're still both going to be part of the debt on that property. But that also means that you cannot do anything with that property without the other person's permission. So you're going to have, like, if you wanted to put that house up for sale, the person who isn't living there is going to have to agree to it. That's why it's really not a good idea unless either you're just willing to throw your hands up and say, I don't want the house. I don't care. I've got my own house. Keep the house. This is probably not for you. Again, a lot of these issues that surround money and debt and bank accounts, they really need an attorney to look at them because until a judge decides where that money goes, it belongs to both of you and somebody could run off with it. Somebody could make off with it and then it's gone. And if you filed an absolute divorce, there's not going to be any way for you to get it back. So we're going to say no here. We're going to say that the Blue Bloods don't have any debt or that they don't care. And then I saw this asked in the Q&A a minute ago. Have you or your spouse signed a private written agreement about your marital issues? And that agreement must be incorporated into the divorce judgment. So let me non-lawyer that for you. If you did a separation agreement with your spouse, or you did an agreement with your spouse where they agreed to pay you alimony or a certain amount of money per month for whatever, if it was support or anything like that, and it was agreed at the time that if you ever got divorced, it was going to become part of your divorce. Essentially, the judge is going to take that agreement and staple it to the back of the divorce and make it all one thing. If you have one of those things and you say yes here, guess what it's going to tell you to do? It's going to tell you to stop and talk to a lawyer because it is much more complicated to get your agreement merged into this agreement without an attorney because it's going to need to go in front of a judge and there's a lot more stuff that has to happen. So if you have one of those agreements, a simple divorce is not for you. You're free to all this information that you need to gather is still good because if you go see an attorney, they're going to ask you for all of this stuff. But if you have one of these agreements, you should not be filing this kind of action. All right, but we're going to say no because they just don't want to talk to each other at all. So now we've filled out these questions. We've made it through all of the stop signs. We're going to keep going. Okay, now we're just going to fill it out. Now, like I said, I've made up Caroline Blueblood and her husband Cameron Blueblood. We're just going to use them as funny examples so that we can kind of proceed forth. If you're curious, if you have a same-sex marriage, as long as you have a valid marriage license, this also works for you. And there's going to be a couple of places where it's going to ask you if you are the wife or if you are the husband, and if the person you're filing against is the wife or the husband, so that the system does allow you to do that if you're in a same-sex marriage and you're looking to separate that. But right now we're just going to fill in Miss Blueblood's information, and we have to put an address in. So I'm going to put a very fake address in. So I don't want anybody to think we're using any real names or addresses. All right, and I did use a real zip code because it recognizes if you don't use a real zip code. And then this is going to be Orange County. And then it wants to know when Miss Tarfoot moved to North Carolina. Well, she was born here, so we're just going to put in her date of birth as 1980. So she's been here all of her life. Oh, it doesn't like that. Click on it. There we go. She's been here all her life, so we're not worried about the 6 months requirement. Again, it's asking you about this, and if you pop this up, it's going to make sure that you have been here for as long as you're supposed to have been here. Okay, so we want to make sure that you're not running over here from Tennessee because you think you can get divorced faster here than you could there. Now we have to put a phone number in, so we're just going to do as fake as we possibly can. We're not going to put a cell phone number in. You don't have to. You don't have to put an email address in. So I'm not going to do that because I don't want to generate a garbage email in the system. But it can help sometimes because when you put your email address on here, it's going to print it on your papers. And oftentimes that's how the clerk will contact you, or that's how an attorney might contact you if your spouse hires an attorney, so that everybody can be able to communicate here. All right, so Miss Blueblood is the wife, so we're going to select that she's a wife, and this is all we need. Now, we're saving ourselves having to put this information in about 10 different forms just by doing it once on the website. All right, and now we're going to put in the information about her husband. So we're going to put in his name. We're not going to put his middle name in. I just want to show you that you don't have to. You only have to fill out things that have the little red star. And just to make it interesting, we'll give him a suffix. And do I know his current address? Yes, I do. He's just moved down the street to Durham. Now, let's just take a minute because I did see somebody ask in the Q&A about service by publication. I'm going to talk about that when we go back to the slides in a minute. But if you say no, they're going to ask you to try to give as much information as you can about the last place somebody knew where they were, because you might be able to use that information to get a little further on the line. Okay, so it's just about how much you know. If you don't know it all and you leave this blank, you see it will let you leave it blank. It's going to give you some further instructions when we move along. But we're going to put his address in just because I want to show you what the papers look like. And this is going to be Durham County. And just like his wife, he's lived here all his life. So we're not going to have to worry about that. Now, it's okay if he's moved to another state or if your spouse has moved to another state. But you're going to, as long as you've been here for 6 months, that's fine. But you still have to put this information in to make sure that we know where we need to send the papers. Okay, because the papers have to be served. So we want to make sure that we know where it's supposed to be. So just like with us, we're going to have put his date of birth in, and let's make it, and he is the husband in this relationship. And then we're going to move on. Okay. I do see a question. Let me check the chat for a minute before we talk about this military service thing. I want to make sure I haven't missed any questions that were too far back. Somebody's asking about the website. If you just Google North Carolina guide and file, it will take you to the website. You'll be able to find it. There's only one website that's really going to take you to. And I do see somebody asking about once they separated from their spouse, they let them visit a couple of times to avoid escalating a situation. It depends on the definition of visit. If they came to the house and stayed for a day or two and then left again, and it was, it really, that's a very big, it depends. And it might be worth at least getting some advice from an attorney, even if you don't hire an attorney to file a divorce, just to make sure that you qualify for that separation. Because if other people around you thought that your spouse had come home and you guys were gonna, you were trying again, or you were gonna make it up again, if other people thought that you were together again, then that can destroy that separation period and it can make the clock start over. And so you might have to start back from that most recent time your spouse visited. You're just gonna need to, an attorney's probably gonna need to talk to you about the specifics of that. So you might at least want to get some advice from an attorney about that. And somebody's asking about what happens if you can't ever find your spouse. We're going to talk about that in a minute, about what happens when you don't know where they are. The answer to your question, though, is that yes, your divorce may still be granted, but you have to go through some extra hoops to do it. And then the last question is about filing. Somebody's asking about filing electronically. You cannot file this electronically in North Carolina. You have to have an attorney account to be able to do that. This website is designed for you to complete all the papers here and then print them out and take them to the clerk's office and file them there. Okay, let's go back over here to our Service Civil Relief Act declaration. This is where it's asking you about your spouse's military service. Okay, they're going to ask you questions about their military status of both persons in the case. And again, this is so that no judgment happens when somebody is out on active duty. The state of North Carolina just will not grant any kind of court order against somebody who is out in service somewhere where they cannot get back to North Carolina. And active duty may just mean that they're stationed in Portland and they can't get leave to come back here. If they're somewhere, though, that they've been ordered by the military to be, you won't be able to get the divorce immediately, at least not until we're sure that they've had some notice of the process and have had an opportunity to say, this is when I'll be back, this is when I can be available. So when you get to this page, it's just going to ask you to fill out the information. Now, there's a couple different things that you can do here, but I can say, do you have a copy of his orders to report to the military? Well, no, he's not in the military, so I don't have a copy of them, so I'm going to say no. I know that he is not in military service now, but maybe he was for the first 5 years after he turned 18. If you don't know, if your spouse has left and has been gone for a long time, or maybe you were married only for a little while, but it was later in life, like maybe you didn't get married till you were in your 40s or 50s and you're not actually sure if they were in the military. You can click this link and it will take you to another website to let you search for somebody's military status, and it will tell you if they're in the military or not. We're not going to do this, but you can do this. It's not required, but you can do this, especially if it's somebody who maybe was in the military or was in the reserves and you're not actually sure where they are right now. I would suggest going through this process. But we're going to say no because I know that he's not there. All right, so we're just going to give them a reason. And this has to be, they want as much information as you can give them. So it may be that you got married when you were 18 and your spouse has never been in the military the entire time you've been in the military. Just tell them why. Okay. This is not, you're not going to get in trouble for, if I replace this with dishonorably discharged, you're not going to get any kind of trouble for explaining how it is what you know, but just tell the court, this is how I know that they're not in the Army right now. And this is how I know I can proceed with this. All right. Now it's going to start asking about the marriage. You can get most of this information off of your marriage certificate. If you're not sure, you can always go to the Register of Deeds in the county where you got married, and they can give you a copy of the marriage certificate. Or you can ask for a copy of it. You can make a copy on your own. But it tells you to look at your marriage certificate. So we'll say that they got married in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And that they got married, we'll say, oh, I hit a button. Okay, there we go. So I tried to continue and did not want me to continue. We'll say they got married in 1999. So we'll say December of 1999. So nice Christmas Day wedding. All right. And then we're going to say that the separation was in October of, or let's see, let's do August of 2020. So they've been separated for a while. They could have done this sooner. But I guess maybe somebody wants to get remarried. Maybe somebody came from a state where they thought this would happen automatically, but it didn't. But they're separated, they're done, and it's obviously been more than a year. Now, they don't have any children, but I do want to show you what happens if you say yes here. If you say yes, it's going to ask you how many children, and then the next page is going to ask you to put in the names and birth dates of your children. Again, this has no impact on a custody case, and it has no impact on a child support case. But what the court just needs to know for this information, like they need to know who has the children right now, just so that they can make it official in the divorce papers, so that the state knows where those kids are, so that when somebody tries to get registered for school or for their healthcare benefits or whatever, that there's a court order that says, yeah, this person has these kids right now. But we're going to say no, we're going to say they didn't have any children, and we're going to keep going. So we put in two different addresses. We put in Caroline's address as being in Orange County and Cameron's address as being in Durham County. We can file in either one of those counties because one of us lives in one place and one of us lives in another place. So you can do this based on what you think would be easier for you or for your spouse or for both of you, or wherever, whatever courthouse is closest to you. Like you might live in Orange County, but it's closer to go to the Durham County courthouse than it is to drive to Hillsborough, wherever that happens to be. Now, if you pick another county, it's going to say you shouldn't do this. You need to file where one or both of you lives. Okay. So we're going to pick Orange County because they have a nicer courthouse than Durham County. So we're going to pick Orange County, and we're going to keep going. This is because it's going to fill in the county on every one of your pieces of paper. So it needs to know where that's going to be. All right. So somebody asked a good question about the thing where you live. You put in your current address and you put in your spouse's current address. You're going to get the divorce where you live. It doesn't matter if you got married in Mecklenburg County or in New Hanover. You're concerned now about where you need to take the court filing, and that's going to be where one of you lives. All right. Do you have a lawyer? Well, right now we don't have a lawyer, so we're going to say no. If you say yes, it's going to want your lawyer's information. Now, I'm going to give you guys a free tip. If you have a lawyer and your lawyer sends you to do this on your own, you need to get a new lawyer because this is what you're paying them to do. So we're going to say no, we do not have a lawyer. We're doing this on our own. We're not doing this with any help from an attorney. And then it's going to leave all this other stuff blank. This is just keeping you from having a bunch of stuff filled out on the papers that you don't need. Okay. And again, it's fine if your spouse lives in another state or your spouse has moved to another state, as long as you've lived in North Carolina for at least 6 months. That's good enough. Because the court's just concerned about, whether or not they have the power to grant your divorce. As long as you live here, you're good. All right. And again, it's going to remind you, I am not asking for spousal support, and I understand that I can never ask for it. Now, if it tells you that you have an open claim, it's going to ask you, some other questions. We're not going to say that because we're not going to do that. And then this is, somebody else asked me this before, if you have a private settlement agreement, then you're going to have to talk about a couple of extra things. But we're not asking for anything. We're not asking for any property distribution. We're not asking for any of these other claims. So we're just going to say we're not, because if we were asking for any of this other stuff, we need to talk to a lawyer. We need to go talk to a lawyer so that we don't get our money messed with. You have to pay a little bit of money to save a lot of money in that case. Now, this next page that's coming up, this is if you want to change your name after the divorce. I imagine that this mostly apply to women if they want to go back to their maiden name. Though I did go to school with a couple who they both changed their last name to a different last name when they got married. They had very ordinary last names. One of them was a Smith and one of them was like a Brown or something. And so they just made up a new last name when they got married. So they might both want to change their names if they were to get divorced. If you say yes, it's going to ask you what you want it to be. So we're going to say that Caroline would like to go back to her maiden name. So we're going to give her her maiden name back. All right. Now, we don't have to do this. If we'd said no, it's just going to skip this. We're going to say that Caroline wants to change her name because she's the one who's filing. Now, we're almost done with getting all of the forms. It's now going to tell you what to do now that you've done all this work. So once you've done all this work, it's going to take us to a big list. All right. Now it's telling you you're done. Now, it didn't take us anywhere near an hour to do that. And that was with me talking a lot. I know that the website says it can take up to an hour, but I think, if you have just a few quiet minutes to sit and complete this, it doesn't take that long. But it says we're done with all these questions. And now what it's going to do is it's going to generate all of the work. So all of these forms are completed. If we wanted to then go through the forms, we could. Or if we want to tell the court, we want to waive the filing fee. So we're going to start this. I'm going to go through this for the benefit of those of you who may need this. If you don't need this, feel free to take a brief bathroom run or grab a cup of coffee. This is not going to take very long. So if you want to ask the court if you can file this for free, you're going to say yes. Now, if you are not sure or you don't want to give this information out, like it was all fun and games and we were just putting names and addresses and phone numbers in there, but if you don't want to disclose that you're on public benefits or that you're drawing disability, then that you should probably maybe stop and talk to a lawyer, because this form will become part of the court record. It will go into the court file because it's going to have your case number on it. So if you're not comfortable with that, then you should probably talk to an attorney about whether or not this is the right thing for you to do. Or maybe you should, ask for some of the nonprofit legal help over here and talk to somebody before you do this. But we're going to say yes, just so that you can see what this looks like. And again, it wants you to make sure that you have everything that you need. It's going to ask you some questions. We're going to continue on because we already looked at that big list. We'll say, yes, there's public benefits. Let's say there is temporary assistance and work first family assistance. Okay, because those are common things that some people get, especially when they have split their households and somebody took the kids with them. No, we do not have a legal aid lawyer because I'm not your lawyer. So we're going to say no to that. And it's going to now be in the batch of forms that we're about to look at that we can go through, and you can kind of see where all of this work that we just did went. We're not going to take the survey. We're just going to hit next. That survey is just for them to gather information about how their system is working. Okay, so we want to proceed. And it's a little slow right now because it's thinking, because it's generating all those forms that you're going to need. Let me scroll through and see about questions. Okay, we'll come back to that. All right, so now we're able to review this, and you can look at any of these before you print them out, okay? So we'll start with the actual complaint. Let's just take a look at it. It's going to open it up for us. And it looks just like a real court document. It looks like just like a real filing. We've got everybody's residencies, we've got marriage, we've got separation date. We're saying there's no minor children. Now, if we had filled out that part about kids, this is just where the kids' names and dates of birth would be. Okay. And there's not anything else on here about the kids, because again, no effect on custody, but there's, this is just where you're looking at. Also, if your kids are over the age of 18, like the blue bloods could very well have kids who are over the age of 18 because they're both in their 40s. They would not be on here either. Okay. And again, it's going to say, I'm not seeking spousal support. Now, if you have an open claim for it, like you could have answered yes before, there could be some other boxes that are checked here, depending on how you filled the papers out. But again, if you're going to do one of these two things, you really need to have a lawyer look at this before you do anything. Same thing about the equitable distribution. So this part is about you getting paid, and this part here, number 8, is about you guys splitting money and houses and cars and things. This is where Ms. Tarfoot is requesting to go back to her maiden name. And then this is where she's saying, I would like a divorce. Okay, I've given you all my information. I would like a divorce. And this is the name that I would like it to be. Now you're going to go in and there's a lot of places for you to sign, and there's a lot of places that tell you to wait. So make sure when you print your papers that you only sign in the presence of a notary, because some of them, so you may just have to go to the bank and do a whole bunch of notary signatures at one time before you go to the clerk's office. Okay. So you're going to print out copies of the divorce. You're going to print out copies of all of these pieces of paper. Some of them are just cover sheets. They're clear what they are. This is where we said we didn't know anybody was, or we know nobody's in the military. And then these are the papers where it says, I would like to proceed without having to pay. Now it's going to print out a couple of extra things for you that we're going to look at in the slides in a minute. I just want to point them out here. One of them is the actual judgment for absolute divorce. So this is when you actually get your court date and you're ready to go in front of the clerk or the judge. You're going to take this piece of paper with you, and this is what they're going to sign to actually give you a divorce. It's going to be down here. There's a place for them to sign. It's a place to do the name change. So you're doing the judge's work for him or her. You're just going to take it to them and hand it to them, and they're going to sign it and give you your divorce. So that's also one of the things that's provided here. Okay, we're going to go back to our slides now, and get back to the business of, just making sure that we know what we're doing, because we've created all the forms now. So everything I'm going to do now assumes that, okay, I've gone to the guide and file, I've walked through all this stuff, and I'm ready to go. Now, again, there is an alternative where you can download the forms. And like I said, it's a long list of forms that you have to have. You have to search for the form. I do not suggest this. I left it in here just to kind of give you an example. These are all those forms that we just filled out by completing a survey. You don't do the survey, you have to fill out every one of these individually. And nobody really wants to do that, I don't think. All right, so now we're ready to talk about filing, about taking your papers to the courthouse and getting them filed, okay? So you need to take a bunch of copies. You need 3 copies of everything that you take with you, except for the indigent petitioner, you need 2 of those. So you're going to need to print a lot of things. And the reason why you're going to do this is there's going to be 1 copy for the courthouse to put in the file to make the court file. There's going to be 1 copy that's going to get sent to your spouse, because your spouse, you can't do this without your spouse knowing about it. Okay. There's no way to sneaky do this. They're going to get informed this has been filed against them. So 1 copy is for them and it's going to get sent to them. And then 1 copy is for you to keep so that you have a copy of all the stuff that you did. Now the civil summons sheet, I have a note on here about some courts requiring a different color. I haven't seen any different color sheets in a lot of years. You can always check with your clerk of court, but if you come in there and you've got all of your papers printed and ready to hand to the clerk, I don't think they're going to fuss much over this being on a yellow piece of paper or not. Or the worst that could happen is that they hand you a yellow piece of paper and just ask you to fill out this 1 piece of paper on a different color. If you're not sure, you can always call the clerk's office in the county where you live or where you intend to file, and they'll tell you what it is that you need. So like I said, you're going to take multiple copies of everything, and you're going to be able to save this. The website we were on had an option to download. So you can download all of those PDFs and just keep them on your hard drive, but it's always good for you to have a copy of the one that has been signed. and the one that has the stamp on it, which is why you definitely need to take a copy for yourself. So how do we file? Make sure you don't sign anything early. Okay, so there was all those places where it said sign in front of a notary, sign in front of a notary, sign in front of a notary. Make sure that you don't sign that stuff until your notary is standing there with their notary stamp. Otherwise, you're going to have to print the stuff out and try again, because the notary is not going to say, oh, okay, well, I can see that that's you, and I'm going to stamp it even though you've already signed it. So you got to make sure that you haven't done that too early. Make sure that you have multiple copies. I said it once already, it's really important. And your notary is going to have to notarize all those copies. So, you're going to sign your name a whole bunch, because you're taking a really big legal step, and you're going to have to do this. You're just going to have to sign your name a lot, and somebody's going to have to put their stamp on there that you're swearing that this is really you and that everything you put here was true. Once you've done all this, once you've gotten everything appropriately signed, then go to the clerk of court in the county where you're going to file and hand in the paperwork. They're going to go through the process with you. They're going to make sure that you have all the documents you need. They're going to give you a file number. And then some clerks of court's office will talk about service with you, because you can do it sometimes in the clerk's office, but then some clerks are going to tell you, okay, now you have to go serve this. So that's what we're going to talk about now, because this is where we're going to answer a lot of the questions in the Q&A about what if I don't know where they are, or what if. Okay. So let's talk about the what ifs. You can serve in 3 different ways. You can serve by having the sheriff department do it. You can serve by actually mailing it in certified mail. So that's the mail that comes with the little green card that somebody has to sign and send back. Or you can serve by publication. The service by publication, that's the one that you're going to use if you don't know where someone is. And we'll talk about that one last, because again, that was a little bit more complicated. Okay. You have to have a copy of the complaint to the defendant, and you have to make sure that it's served. So, if you file your complaint and you're ready to go in front of the judge or the clerk in 30 days because everything is right, the clerk has to be able to look in that file and see, oh, okay, well, he did get served. I do have proof of service in this file. I know either the sheriff served him, or he was served by certified mail, or he was served by publication. Because if you don't have service, the judge isn't going to sign anything. So for a sheriff, you just go to a sheriff's department. Like I said, sometimes you can do this at the clerk's office. Ask them if they do it there. But if they don't, you're going to go to the sheriff's department. You're going to ask for the civil process department. Only sheriffs do this. So don't go to the police department. Go to the actual sheriff's office in your county. You're going to ask for the civil process desk, and you're going to say, I need this served. Here's the complaint, and here's the summons. Okay. So what they're going to do is and you see how they need 2. I'll tell you why they need 2. They're going to give 1 complaint to your spouse. They're going to give 1 civil summons to your spouse. And then they're going to sign the other one, and they're going to take it back to the clerk's office. Or they're going to return it to you and ask you to take it to the clerk's office. Now, if your petition, if you ask the court to do this for free, if that was granted, you're going to need to take a copy of that with you too, so that you don't have to pay the service fee. Because if you do, you also have to pay them, because they got to get in their car and they got to drive out there and they've got to serve this person. They're going to charge you a fee for it unless you've been deemed, unless it's been waived, unless you've been told, no, you can do this for free. The deputy is going to make a note of the date and time on the back of the summons, and then they're going to send it back to the clerk. You can always check with the sheriff's department about whether or not something has been served. Though I would tell you, just be nice to them and give them a few days, and don't start calling an hour after you've dropped it off, because then they might lose it behind their desk for a little bit because, they're not happy with you. So they're doing a service, you're paying for the service, just give them their couple of days to get it done. You are going to need to know when you go into court at the end of this when the defendant was served, and it's going to be on that piece of paper. It's going to say, okay, the sheriff's department handed it to him at this time. Okay. So that's how you're going to do this. All right. You can also serve by certified mail. Okay. So if you're going to serve by certified mail, you're going to need to mail the complaint and the summons in that envelope. You're going to need to take it to the post office. Okay. You can't just drop it in the mailbox. You're going to have to ask for certified mail. and they're going to give you that card to fill out. They're going to show you how to stick it on the envelope. And then what you will get back in the mail is that little green card. When you get that little green card, you need to take that to the clerk's office and say, this is my proof of service. I need to file this, okay? And you're going to need to take this piece of paper with it. And it's going to have to be signed in front of a notary. Now, this piece of paper you can download from our website. It will also generate itself on the Guide and File website if you need it from there. But you're going to have to take this. It's got to be signed in front of a notary again. So I hope you have a good friend who's a notary, so that you can get all this done. And you're going to need to take it, and they're going to put it in the file. The reason for this is because the judge is going to look through the file when he's about to grant your divorce and make sure that it's there. Now, there is a separate form that your spouse can just fill out. It's called an acceptance of service. Somebody in the chat just asked, can you and your spouse go to the clerk's office together? If you guys are amicable and you're just really ready to get this done, absolutely. And you may even be able to get this acceptance of service filled out while you're there. You may be able to say, look, I'm accepting service. Please, let's move this process along. And then this prevents extra steps of having to take it to the sheriff or doing the certified mail. Again, you always want to keep a copy of any of these sorts of things that you file with the court so that you have a copy of it when you go. The last way you can serve someone is by publication, okay? This is a last resort because you do not know where someone is. They have fled the coop. Maybe they were running from the law. Maybe they were running from their father-in-law. I don't know. Well, you don't know where they are. You don't know. You don't have an address. You think maybe they stayed with their mama for a little while, but they're not there anymore. To do this, you've got to try to find them. So you need to try to serve. You need to maybe try to serve them at mama's address first. You need to contact people. You need to try every different way you can to try to find them. And if this is overwhelming to you, if you're like, I don't know how to find somebody, I haven't been able to find him for 2 years, how am I going to find him now? Maybe you need to talk to an attorney, because an attorney is going to have some different ways to do this that maybe you don't. And maybe they will be able to find them, and then you can get it taken care of. Because when you serve somebody by publication, it slows the whole process down, because this literally means you have to print a notice in the newspaper, right? You have to get a notice printed in the newspaper in the last place that that person was known to be. It has to stay in the newspaper for 45 days. And then you have to go back to the court and say, look, I've done this thing. I've tried my best. You may not be comfortable doing that. If you're afraid that you're not going to be able to do that the right way, again, maybe you want to get a consultation with an attorney. You don't need to hire them to do the whole divorce, but maybe you need to talk to them about just this issue of how do I get this person served, okay? So if you're not sure about any of that stuff, you want to at least talk to an attorney and see if maybe they can help you. Okay, so right now we're going to say that Miss Caroline Blueblood has printed all her documents. Maybe Mr. Blueblood does also want to be out of this marriage, and so he's filled out that acceptance of service. So there's a record of the service in the file, and we are ready to be divorced. They would like to go their own separate ways and stop having to have that stupid house divided bumper sticker on their car. Okay, they're ready to go. So there's three different ways, or there's a couple different ways they can do this. The first is that you can ask the clerk of court to do it. This is something you're going to talk about with your clerk of court's office about how you get this scheduled. So if you have a divorce and you've done the papers and the service is in the file and the defendant has not said or done anything, has not lifted a finger, and is also ready to be divorced, you may get a phone call from the clerk of court that says, we're ready to enter your divorce. Come on in this day. Or you may call the clerk and say, I filed this 35 days ago. I haven't gotten any more papers. You know, you've got the sheriff served him on this day. Can I have my divorce? And the clerk can either give you a time to come in and see the clerk, or can give you a time to go and do it in front of the judge. So if you go in front of a judge, you're just going to, like, the judge is going to have the file. The judge is probably going to ask you if everything that you've said in there is true. And then they're going to say, okay, do you have a judgment for me to sign? And that's that piece of paper that we looked at before. We're going to look at it again in a minute. This is going to vary from county to county. Everybody does it a little bit differently. So when you go to talk to your clerks, when you go to file this, talk to your clerk about how this works. Ask them if they do judgments in front of the clerk. Ask them, am I going to have to go to court? Am I going to have to schedule this in court? What am I going to need to do? So there's somebody in the chat who's got an order that's been signed by a judge that is for alimony that's already been done. She's going to need to go to court, or he's going to need to go to court and say, Your Honor, I already have this order. I also need it to be incorporated. I'm still strongly suggesting to that person that you talk to an attorney to make sure that gets done the right way so that it doesn't go away. But because you already have one court order, it's already been ordered. I hope you're already getting payments on it. It isn't, you're not going to have to ask for it after the divorce. So that should be okay. But again, I'd at least check with the person who did the order for you, that attorney maybe who helped you get the original order, to make sure that it gets preserved in your divorce. Now, if you show up to court on the day that you're supposed to be there and suddenly the defendant is there, you're probably going to be asked in the court, you're just going to have to say, look, we were married on this day. We separated on this day. I wasn't ever going to go back. I've got my date. I'm ready to go. I'm ready. Your Honor, please just give me my divorce. The defendant's going to have an opportunity to say, well, we weren't really separated. I always thought she'd come back or whatever. That doesn't matter, right? Because remember, we said it only has to be the intent of one person to stay separated. But you may both have to talk to the judge before something gets signed. So you're going to have a notice of hearing. The clerk will tell you what you need to put on it. And that notice of hearing has to be sent to somebody. And again, talk to your clerks. It is their job. And again, you go in with all these papers filled out already, you've made their job easier from the outset. They're going to be a lot more friendly and able to help you to get all this stuff done. So you're going to go to the judge. Again, you need a bunch of copies of everything just to make sure that everybody's good. Okay. And everything that you put in that court file needs to have been sent to the defendant at some point. Okay, so for a notice of hearing, the clerk is going to help you do this. So you say, I need to be on the next divorce court date. What is that? So the clerk might hand you a piece of paper and say, okay, this is the next date. Please fill in your information. And then it has to be sent to the defendant, okay? Because the defendant has to know when they are going to be in court, when they have the opportunity to be in court, okay? And then you're also going to take those forms, the judgment of divorce and the certificate of divorce, which you're going to look at in just a second. You're going to take it to court with you. And you're also going to take a stamped envelope with the defendant's address on it, just in case the spouse is not there, because it needs to be mailed to them. You need to say, I'm done with you. We're done. The clerk is not going to mail it to them. You need to mail it to them. Okay. Again, you're going to fill out the form. You're going to print it out. So there is a judgment this is the one that we just saw on the website that spits it out. It's part of your packet. You take it to court. You don't fill out anything on here because this is for the judge to sign. Okay. And then afterwards, you're going to mail it out to the defendant once it's done. Okay. So this is the judgment. This is the actual court order. And then this is the certificate that will go into the vital records. So the same place where your marriage license was kept, this will go into that record now that there's a divorce there. Okay. They keep it with all the marriage certificates and birth certificates and land records. So that's where you're going to be. So you can see we've got all this stuff. Here's the date of separation, no children. And then the clerk's going to fill everything out. So everything that gets spit out, you don't need to write anything else on. You just need to sign where it tells you to sign. All right. If you happen to have a hearing, again, bring a lot of copies with you. Dress business casual, like you're going to a courtroom, right? Have respect for the fact that you're going into a courtroom. There's going to be a lot of other things going on around you. I don't suggest showing up for your divorce in jeans and a t-shirt. And then make sure that you get there a little bit early, right? And be prepared when they give you a day to sit there. You might have to sit there for half a day or a whole day. Because a lot of times all these cases are heard with family court cases. So you're going to hear custody cases and people who are having their alimony decided or their other separation support, and you have to wait your turn. So you're just going to have to sit and wait to be called. The court will take breaks during the day, but you may be there for a while. You also want to just get sworn, go where the judge tells you to go, answer the judge's questions, and then move on. It's very, I know it's an upsetting proposition. It can be scary, especially if you've never been in court before. Just try to take a deep breath and talk slow. You may think you're talking slowly, but think in your brain that you need to talk like you're talking to your 5-year-old niece or nephew, or your 85-year-old grandma. Okay, you need grandma or the baby to be able to understand you. You need the judge to be able to understand you. And then you're going to bring your judgment of absolute divorce as a guide. So let me back up a minute and let's look at that form that we were just looking at, and then I'll show you how you use that. So when we are looking at this form, you're basically going to read to the judge this form. So, Your Honor, I live in Orange County. The defendant lives in Durham County. We've both lived here for more than 6 months. You're just going to read off the list. You're not going to have, this is not one of those things where it's like on TV when you get asked questions and you have to answer them. I mean, the judge may ask you a few questions, but just tell the judge this, read down the list. And then you say, Your Honor, I'm asking for a divorce. And as long as there's not any hiccups or problems, he's going to ask you to hand the judgment to him to be signed. All right, let's get back to where we were. Okay. Once your hearing is done, you're out of court, it's been signed, you're ready to go, right? The clerk's going to have to do some paperwork. You're going to have to hand over a bunch of copies of that divorce. The judge is going to have to sign all of them. The clerk is going to keep a copy for the file. The clerk's going to give some copies back to you. If the defendant is there, the clerk is going to give a copy to the defendant. You don't have to worry about anything. If the defendant is not there, you need to take that last form that Guide and File prints out for you, the certificate of service, because you're going to have to sign it to say, I put this in the mail to him. And you're going to have to give that certificate of service back to the clerk so that they can put it in the file to kind of complete everything. You can just send it regular mail. You don't have to send it that certified green card mail. You can just put it in the mail. Or you can, like I said, if the defendant's there, you don't have to do this. And then you keep a copy of this judgment, because this is the piece of paper that officially makes you divorced. So you should keep it where you keep your passport, your birth certificate, your social security card, your vaccine card, wherever you keep it with those important things in case you need it moving forward, because you may need to take that judgment to a bank to show the bank, I'm divorced. I would like this person to be taken off of my account, or I'm divorced. I would like this person not to inherit the account, or I need to have them taken off my health care because we're not married anymore. You might need this piece of paper for a lot of different things, so make sure you hang on to it. And then lastly, if you had a name change on here, you're going to need an extra copy to make sure that you can get all of those things. Like you're going to need one to get a new social security card, or to get your driver's license changed. And those sorts of things. Like you may need it for your work, if you need to get your name changed at work, depending on where you work. So you want to make sure that you keep that fourth copy for you if you did name change stuff. Now, if you have other questions about name change, or if you have questions about getting your kids' names changed after the divorce, or after a custody action or anything like that, you can always go back to our website. We do some name change work for folks. If you need the help, we might be able to help you if you qualify for our services. So you can always call and ask us, or you can just talk to an attorney and say, I need a name change, or I need to get this taken care of. All right, that actually concludes my presentation. And I'm going to scroll through the Q&As and make sure that I didn't miss anything. But if you are not interested in any of the questions and answers, or you don't have any yourself, thank you for attending. And please apply for our services if you feel like you need them. And we wish you the best of luck moving forward. All right, let me see what questions I might have missed. So there's a good question. Does your defendant spouse have to come to court? No, they do not. So as long as they have been properly served, as long as either the sheriff's department was able to serve them, or you get that green card back and you take it back to the clerk's office and that goes into the file, they don't have to come. This isn't like a criminal case. So if they don't show up, the judge is not going to issue an order for their arrest or anything like this. This is a civil case. You're essentially suing somebody. And if they don't show up, they don't show up, and the judge will proceed without them as long as there's proof that they were actually served. I think that answered a couple of questions. A lot of y'all were concerned about absent spouses. All right, let's see. Okay, I don't see any other questions that we didn't cover. So I'm going to have our presenters stop recording the session. And like I said, if you need any other help, go back to the website where you registered for this presentation, apply for our services if you need them. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Allison. We really appreciate your time. Have a good day.